Welcome back to the Unpack Mindset, folks. My name's Jesse, your host. Quick question: does your dog post up outside the restroom when you're using the restroom? Like, does he sit outside? Is that normal behavior? I don't know, because every time I gotta use the restroom, he parks his ass right outside the door. I mean, are they guarding or what? I don't know. Anyway, folks, hopefully you guys are having a good week. Let's talk about this, right? Before I go into it, though, uh keep in mind, folks, we talk about a lot of things, right? Like I always said, open dialogue supersedes everything else. So this is not really going to be an anti-union rant or podcast. It's going to be more of a wake-up call, right? And I feel like it's just something that should be discussed, right? And so somebody asked me to talk about the prison closures and what were my thoughts. And so, I feel like California didn't fall apart overnight, right? It's been a death by 1,000 conferences. That's one way to put it, right? It's like every time you turn around, there's another headline about billions in homelessness spending with no receipts, another infrastructure project that disappears into midair, thin air, and another transformational announcement that somehow transforms absolutely nothing, folks. We got a bridge to nowhere, roads that look like they were designed by a coalition of blank stares, right? And a homelessness crisis, folks, that gets more expensive every year while the results get worse. You know, and through all of it, these theatrics don't stop. The speeches, the ribbon cuttings, the dramatic pauses, and the bold leadership branding, right? But here's the thing, right? Branding doesn't fix broken math. And you know, and the math is more broken than in the prison system. You know, California's closing prisons like DVI and Chuckawalla and CRC was one of the recent prisons that were closed. And yet the CDCR budget stays at 13 what something around 13.6 billion, right? The inmate population drops, but the cost of the inmates skyrockets, right, to like something about around 127,700, something around that per inmate. Facilities shut down, but the state continues paying to maintain all the closed institutions, right? And they're kept in like shutdown mode. In my opinion, folks, that's not reform. That's not efficiency. That's not progress, right? That's a paper shuffle, folks. And it's designed to look like progress while the system quietly regresses behind a curtain, right? And the people caught in the middle, it's the workers, right? The correctional officers, the staff, the families, the communities built around these institutions. They're being uprooted, man, and displaced and reassigned, not because it makes the system safer or smarter, but because it makes the optics cleaner. This is where the unions should be coming in, right? And let's make it clear, this is not, anti-union uh, episode, right? It's just a wake up call, man. I feel like you know I feel like union members are just being treated like props in someone else's theatrical theater too, right? They're being moved around, the board to create an illusion of reform while the real decisions are being made in rooms that none of us are invited to. Meanwhile, the leadership is out going, is out there golfing, shaking hands and posing photos with the same politicians who are destabilizing their members' lives. Loyalty is a two-way street, man. And right now, that street is full of detours, closures, under construction signs, and there's no completion date. Here's the part that Sacramento doesn't see coming, folks. It's the younger generation, man. They're not guessing anymore, man. They're not relying on talking points. They're not waiting for someone to explain the budget to them. They're pulling up the data, folks. They got the PDFs online, man. They got the audit reports. They got the CDCR cost breakdowns, and they're asking the questions that cut through the theatrics, right? You know, if the state is closing prisons, why isn't the budget shrinking, right? If you're saving money and you're cutting programs, that's two different things. If the inmate population is dropping, why is the cost per inmate exploding? If the state claims it's their savings, then why are they still paying for empty buildings? And now let's talk about the grift, folks. I'm sure you've already heard of it. The ones showing these 258 million cut, to the department. The ones claiming like a 2% reduction. The ones that look like the proof, like it's proof that the state is saving money. I don't know, man. Here's the truth. Here's what I see. Those grifts are technically accurate, right? But they're completely misleading at the same time. They don't show you savings. They show baseline reductions. A state that simply stops spending money because it's running a deficit, and then that's not efficiency, right? That's not reform. That's not smart budgeting. That's the government version of I save money by not buying your ass groceries. It's a grift that doesn't explain the fixed costs still remain. That healthcare liabilities are still there, administrative overheads still remain there, and maintenance for all the closed prisons are still there, and staff transfers increase costs, right? The overtime increases, workers' comp increases, infrastructure liabilities increase. And it's fucking crazy, folks. It really is. And they're definitely not going to show you the latest revisions that actually raise the budget. Back up to the rising costs. So, it sounds ugly, right? Because you're getting uprooted, you're leaving, but the state isn't saving money. You're just a pawn, right? That's what it feels like. They don't show you that the cut was temporary or cosmetic and then immediately reversed. They don't show you that the system shrank capacity, but not its overhead. They don't show you that the savings are just vanished cost, not reinvested dollars. They don't say that the state is still paying for empty buildings. They don't show you that the math doesn't math. And I understand, because a lot of you guys are busy. A lot of you guys are just trying to maintain, right? Trying to pay your bills, trying to make a living, trying to have a good family life. I get that. But it's just the information is out there, right? And that's why I feel like this younger generation is starting to call it out, because the receipts are public, folks. Look it up for yourself. The numbers are public. The contradictions are public, right? And the people who are supposed to protect the workers, the unions, cannot afford to ignore this, right? Not any longer. We're not operating under the same era, folks. We're not operating under that same era. You can keep pushing this shit, but there's going to come a time where all the stuff that you're hiding, all the numbers that you're not trying to put out there, they're going to be easily accessible. They are now. The snowball's already rolling, and the younger generation, they're not waiting for permission to call out the shenanigans, man. It's they've got the data, man, and they can access it if they want. So as far as the the prison closures are concerned, man, I just feel like that's nothing but a paper shuffle, man. It's and it's just a big waste of time, a big waste of money, and it's a huge inconvenience, man. And I don't know, man. I just think it's bullshit, right? Anyways, that's my little rant for today. It's not really a rant, but I just feel like, yeah, we need to get this right, right? Anyways, you guys have a good night. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'm out of here.